Hello, everyone. Welcome to Savoy PEO Spotlight Podcast, where we help Savoy brokers better understand the PEO landscape, who our partners are, and how they differ from one another, and most importantly, when to use them. I'm Cassandra Novak, and I'm part of the Savoy PEO Center of Excellence. My role is to help brokers position PEO strategically, avoid those missteps, and bring the right partner to the table at the right time. Each episode features one of our Savoy's trusted PEO partners and focuses on real-world broker scenarios. And today, we're joined by Ben Codi, Divisional Vice President of Broker Sales at TriNet. Thanks for joining us, Ben. It seems like it's been quite a while since I've talked to you, but I'm glad to see you again.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me. I'm glad to participate.
Well, because I know you, and I don't feel like that there might be many others out there joining us today that know you as well, could you just share a little bit about yourself so that they could get to know you like I do?
Absolutely. Yeah, so Ben Codi, Divisional Vice President of Broker Sales at TriNet. I've been with TriNet since 2014. I've been in this space since 2007. I'm a licensed broker as well. And what the title means is it just means that here at TriNet, I oversee all things broker, whether we're working with, great partners like Savoy, if we happen to be working with PEO brokers in the marketplace, general agencies and retail brokers. So that's been my primary function. Really dedicated to that for the past 4 to 5 years with that exclusive focus.
Well, that's great. And that's a vast background. So with that being said, maybe we could dive in a little bit deeper on TriNet and to better understand the 30,000 foot level of TriNet, how long they've been operating, what sizes of organizations are primary to support for you guys, and then describe some of the footprint nationally.
So TriNet's been in business. We've been in business for over 30 years now. We've been public since 2014. And as far as clientele, we've shifted the profile, the type of groups that we go after since, my time since 2014, which, we're going on 12 years now. Uh, I'd say our predominant focus would be what we'd all define as, the core white collar businesses. So they are the professional services companies. They are the accounting firms, the law offices, the architects. We also go into, some blue and gray collar operations like distribution or retail. So it's not so much, I mean, you could say you could focus because a lot of us play in the same space, a lot of the PEOs around the country. But we have our areas, our sweet spots where the benefits of TriNet can add more value to the client. From a geographic standpoint, we are in every state. We operate in every state, but it's not equal as far as the amount of business that we have in every state. So we're very strong in the coast, New York tri-state market, in California, in Texas, in Florida. We have developing markets in the New England states, in the Midwest, in the South Central United States. So we have these developing markets where I think broadly the PEO market is starting to gain traction. And then you asked, Cassandra, about, the target size. So we'll work with any group that has at least north of, I'm going to say about 5 employees, depending on the specific industry that we're going into. But when we look at our averages, our broker generated business, because we get a considerable amount of business from brokers, that average employee count is around 35 to 40. Our direct business is, interestingly enough, a little bit on the smaller side, but we also have some big clients. Our biggest one has a little over 2,000 employees, but there's different reasons why groups that large actually choose, and they're fewer and far between.
So that's interesting. You also mentioned, that size of being larger than 5. Do you have opportunities where you're working with like startup companies or companies that, are below that 5 employee threshold?
So we used to have a focus on much smaller companies, but we moved away from that just because from a risk profile, it didn't really fit. However, having said that, the reason we have the 5 threshold when we're looking at technology companies or life science companies, in the biotech area, as an example, we'll go down to about 5 there, because those organizations, they usually capture talent from much larger organizations. They're used to the infrastructure then of a big company, and that's one of the value adds of the PEO itself. But we try to cap it at that bottom, and then hopefully, the companies grow because we're providing the infrastructure, because the value prop is we'll take off a lot of the burden of running a business so you can grow the business. But anything below that, the risk profile changes. So we try to set that as our floor. I know other PEOs will do 1 employee, we'll do 2 employees. That's just not exactly our sweet spot. We want it a little bit north of that 5 mark, 5 and above.
And do you still see that brokers or client groups are coming specifically for the medical savings, or do you find that there are other drivers today that are bringing clients to TriNet?
So it's with the medical savings is, being in the business since 2007, the medical is a great door opener, because it is a constant pain point that every employer, whether they're large or small, they feel that, right? There's the fluctuations, there's the changes. We know what's going on right now with the big carriers like United Healthcare, CVS, Aetna. Insurance is always a challenge, so that can be a great door opener. But what we're also seeing, though, is more and more companies, and I would attribute this to maybe a changing of the guard with business owners. You have business owners that were in the business for a while and they thought one way, but now you have a newer crop of business owners where they think about business differently. So offloading of things that aren't a core competency that a PEO can do, like compliance, like HR, that appeals to them more. So we're seeing more and more companies focusing more on the infrastructure. Medical is always important, right? Because it's always a pain point, but it's that infrastructure that they get that is driving them. And that's what ultimately keeps a company with TriNet or a PEO.
So I'm seeing much of the same thing. So when I'm talking to our brokers and their clients, as much as the medical is a driving factor, I'm seeing and the conversations that I'm having around it is that, technology is changing every day. And, it sort of works like your cell phone. You go out to Verizon to get a new cell phone and, they go ahead and they change over all your data and you're super excited and you're walking out the door with that brand new cell phone. And yet there's 3 versions already out there. So I feel like business owners aren't even able to keep up with, employer HRIS systems. They're purchasing these really expensive systems. And then by the time they get everything uploaded and the data's there, it's already outdated. Whereas if going to a PEO, you guys are keeping up with that technology and moving with the times, and they're not having to have that burden of managing those scenarios. And then of course, the HR compliance issues are just, between multi-state organizations, them having to know everything that's going on from state to state and manage that seems to also be a huge complication for them.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, I agree at all those points. I mean, with the technology, it is always changing. I think that's a good analogy used with the cell phone and the versions of software. And we invest consistently because it's the technology that's essentially like the payroll, and the technology is the chassis which everything else runs on. So if you're not staying up on the times with the tech, eventually you'll fall behind, because the medical will always be there. That is the commodity play within a PEO. But what differentiates over time is that technology, the integrations, how you connect to the market, the ease of use for the business owner, which provides that longevity, because no PEO wants a company for 1 year where they go get other medical insurance. That's a losing proposition for everyone. So correct. And I think, yeah, and the state compliance, you're right. I mean, that's another thing. There's never going to be politicians or state regulators that decrease the amount of regulation. It's their job to increase regulation. So somebody has to stay up to speed on that. And that's what we do. That's what our focus is.
So I'm sure that context is super helpful to a lot of us and sets the foundation for how brokers should be looking and positioning TriNet. And so recognizing that, PEOs operate in a very competitive market. And I feel like what separates TriNet the most are the layers of platforms that you guys have. Can you elaborate on that for a moment?
Absolutely. So our core TriNet was, we have some competitors that were started as payroll companies that created an offshoot for PEO, and we've done it a little bit differently. PEO was the core, was the core of TriNet. That's how it started, and that is, what we promote and what we sell most often. And when I say PEO, it's the co-employment relationship, it's the sharing the federal tax ID number, sharing of responsibilities and liability, and then the master medical and benefit plans that come along with it. But what we've also recognized is that's not the only fit for a company. Some companies aren't ready for it. Some companies can grow out of it, but it's not the fit for everyone. So we also have the ability in certain circumstances where perhaps there's a medical option in the open market that's a better fit because we don't have the carrier in our master plan. And we allow a company to leverage open market carriers, open market structures like level funded plans or captives and tie into the PEO infrastructure. So that's our second platform. Our third platform is ASO, administrative services only. And that is for the groups that don't necessarily want co-employment. They may, for whatever reason, they decide they don't need that. That's not a good fit for their business. And I define administrative services only as more of a reactive model where you have this set of services that the company can provide like we do, but it's on demand. Whereas the PEO, it's more of a proactive deployment of those because of the shared liability. So what we're trying to do is create an environment where a company can grow with us. They could be in the PEO master. They could use open market plans. They could go ASO. They could go back. They could leave. But it's really what's best for the company. And we're trying to give as many solutions to those organizations and our broker partners in the
And are the
process.
brokers making these decisions when it comes to deciding which platform they should be looking at, or is TriNet guiding them as they come in? Maybe they're coming in with, the full PEO service model in mind. And then, through quoting process, we realize that maybe that's not the best option. Should we be looking for those recommendations from TriNet to kind of guide us along in what platform they should be looking at?
Absolutely. So we do that. So sometimes, Cassandra, brokers do come to the table. They say, we're with an ASO solution today. We'd like to do that. Or I have an open market carrier and I'm not going to remove the Blue Cross Blue Shield in Chicago. Like we got to keep it. So fine, we'll start where they're at. But many times they'll come in and maybe there's one intention and we'll explain the options and we'll look at it and we'll be totally transparent. And if we don't think it's a fit, we'll suggest something else and maybe that'll work and maybe that won't work for them. But we'll bring our expertise so that the broker and the client can make the best decision for them.
And are carve-outs optional in the PEO, in your PEO model? For instance, if we see that the workers' comp doesn't necessarily meet the risk thresholds, or if the medical just isn't favorable, can you carve out either of those or both of those?
We can. So we can carve out either or both. So with workers' compensation, states have rules. So we have to follow the state guidelines. Some states allow it and some don't. If a state allows it, absolutely, we'll carve it out if that's in the best interest of the broker and the client. As far as the benefits, we can always carve out the benefits. We're not beholden to state requirements there. So if the open market plans make more sense, we're happy to carve that out. Whatever's going to work best, again, for the broker and for the group.
So it's crazy how quickly time goes. We seem to be coming up on our time. And so I wanted to just ask you a final question by getting your perspective. Do you see ICRAs becoming a significant factor in the PEO space? And how do you envision that shift taking shape with TriNet or just PEOs in general?
Yeah, ICRAs, over the past year, I've heard more about ICRAs. They come up constantly. And we're evaluating those options. So we're evaluating it on two fronts. So first answer is yes, I think this is going to be a part because you can't deny the need in the market right now. It keeps gaining traction. So we're looking at it on two fronts. One is from the PEO infrastructure standpoint, can you incorporate that and can it run alongside master plans? So that's being explored. There's legal considerations for that are being explored. And then we're also looking at it on when we carve out the benefits in the open market, how to use and leverage ICRAs in that scenario. And I think that's the most likely scenario that'll take hold first, right? Because we don't have the legal considerations and how that coincides and runs side by side with the master. But to answer your question, Cassandra, it is a topic of conversation constantly and something that we're exploring. We want to meet the needs in the market.
Well, Ben, thank you so much. This has been extremely helpful. And thank you for sharing your practical insights. So, for Savoy brokers listening, if you believe TriNet may be the right fit for one of your clients, your first step should always be to engage Savoy's PEO Center of Excellence. We're here to help validate the proper fit, guide strategy, and manage the process end to end. Thank you again, Ben, from TriNet, and thank you to everyone tuning in to the Savoy PEO Spotlight. We're going to see you on the next episode.